Hi class, today we're going to learn about modernism in British literature. When we think of the British, what do you think of? You probably think of them as prim and proper, never really doing anything wrong. They were very big on manners, doing what society expected them to do. We never really see in literature what they were thinking, what they were feeling. They did what was expected of them. This was the case until World War I. That's when we see the modern era come into play. We see a lot of things changing because of the war, which is often reflected in literature, especially the literature we're going to concentrate on this week. Around the beginning of the 20th century to around 1965, that's when the modern period developed. In response to the war, things that used to matter to people no longer mattered, like social status and often marriage because of the devastation of the war. Women assumed positions that were occupied by men before that. They were head of the household now because they had to be. Their husbands were fighting in the war. Roles no longer mattered to men as much as before because every man was a soldier, no matter what family you were born into and what your financial status was. We'll talk more about that tomorrow as we compare and contrast the Victorian era, which was before the modern era, and then when we contrast the modern era. There are many differences there. Something in common that authors in the modern era have is a stream of consciousness. That means we see what the characters are thinking. That wasn't very common then. Before we would see what they were thinking through dialogue and relationships with others, but now we're actually seeing what's inside their mind. We're seeing the thoughts. Some of the authors in the modern era were Rebecca West, Joseph Conrad, which we'll read an essay he's mentioned in, H.G. Wells, Samuel Beckett, and the most important one this week is my absolute favorite, Virginia Woolf. Okay, y'all should be reading Into the Lighthouse this week. You should be around part 1 by Wednesday, okay, because we're going to talk about how that book reflected so much in what was going on in Britain around the modern era after the war, after World War I. Okay, why is British literature so important in this era? It really gave us a look of how life was after World War I. None of us were really alive then, and a lot of things happened. A lot of change happened. The way we know life of today is response to how things changed after the war. Women are allowed to work now. We're allowed to wear pants. We're allowed to get married or not get married, whatever we want to do. A lot of this changed. We'll learn more about it tomorrow as we compare and contrast and see the things that emerged from the modern era. So I look forward to it. In your discussion, make sure you tell me what's important about the modern era that we talked about. Remember, stream of consciousness, that's a very important topic, okay? I'll see y'all tomorrow.